Ladies and gentlemen, overthinking often steals our peace, taking our focus away from what matters and filling our minds with doubts, fears, and unnecessary worries. It tricks us into believing that by thinking about things over and over, we will find the perfect solution or avoid making mistakes. But in reality, overthinking only leads to stress and confusion. Instead of moving forward, we stay stuck in our heads, unable to make clear decisions or take action. Overthinking often turns the simplest of decisions into mountains. What should I wear today? Should I take this job? Do they like me? These questions in themselves may seem easy to answer, but when we overthink, we start to dive deep into every possible scenario, every potential outcome. We begin asking ourselves what everyone else might think, what consequences we might face, or what could go wrong. What happens next? The simple choice becomes a massive burden on our minds. Instead of quickly choosing something, we start questioning everything, overanalyzing even the tiniest details. What if I choose the wrong outfit and feel out of place? What if this job isn't the right fit and I regret it? What if this person doesn't care for me the way I care for them? Our minds run in circles, and before we know it, we've wasted hours, days, or even weeks deliberating over something that would have been a simple decision in the first place. This process of overthinking can lead to indecision. The longer we think about something, the harder it becomes to make a choice. We begin to doubt ourselves, our judgment, and our abilities. The fear of making the wrong decision paralyzes us, and we avoid taking any action at all, allowing opportunities to slip through our fingers. The truth is, making mistakes is part of life. It's okay not to have everything figured out, but when we are caught in the web of overthinking, we forget this. We become so focused on getting everything perfect that we lose sight of the bigger picture. We miss out on experiences because we're too busy worrying about the outcome instead of simply enjoying the process. This constant cycle of worry feeds into our anxiety. Our minds are constantly on alert, seeking answers to questions that may never even need to be answered. We become our own worst enemies, standing in our way. The more we overthink, the more we delay making decisions, and the more we lose our peace. The key to breaking free from this cycle is to accept that no decision is truly perfect. There is always a level of uncertainty, and that is okay. Not everything has to be figured out immediately. It's okay to make decisions based on what feels right at the moment, knowing that if things don't work out, we can always adjust later. Instead of letting your mind spin with every possible outcome, take a deep breath and make a choice. Trust that you have the strength and wisdom to deal with whatever comes next. The more you practice this, the easier it becomes. You will start to feel a sense of freedom and confidence as you stop overthinking and begin trusting yourself more. The next time you find yourself overwhelmed by a simple decision, remind yourself that overthinking doesn't help. In fact, it only hurts. You don't have to have all the answers, and you don't have to be perfect. You just need to take the first step and trust the journey ahead. Life is meant to be lived in the present, not analyzed to death. So stop overthinking and start living. Overthinking often leads to a cycle of endless spiraling thoughts that seem impossible to break. The more you think about something, the more your mind expands the problem, making it seem bigger than it actually is. This cycle starts with a simple concern or question, but once we start thinking about it, our minds begin to run wild. It's as though our brains are hardwired to magnify every worry, and as soon as we entertain one thought, it triggers a flood of others, all feeding into each other. When you start to overthink, you can feel like you are stuck in a loop. For example, you might begin by worrying about a meeting at work. It could be something as simple as wondering whether you'll remember everything you need to say, or whether your colleagues will judge your presentation. But as you keep thinking about it, your mind starts to ask other questions. What if my boss doesn't like my ideas? What if my coworkers are secretly critical of me? What if I fail? Before you know it, you're spiraling into a whole new set of anxieties that weren't even part of the original concern. Suddenly, that small meeting has grown into something far bigger, and your anxiety has escalated without any real reason. This is the nature of overthinking. It takes something small and turns it into something huge. Your mind starts to imagine every possible worst-case scenario, and it can feel like there's no escape from the relentless chain of thoughts. The more you think, the more your mind becomes trapped in this cycle, and the harder it is to stop. Overthinking doesn't just affect the present moment, it also distorts our perception of the future. We start to imagine every possible outcome, good or bad, and we get lost in what might happen. For example, we might worry about the future of our careers, our relationships, or even our health. These thoughts become amplified and often seem uncontrollable. The fear of the unknown consumes us, and we begin to anticipate outcomes that may never happen. The more we think about these possibilities, the more real they start to feel, even though they are just illusions created by our own minds. The problem with this endless thinking is that it doesn't help us make better decisions. In fact, it usually leads to poor decision making because we're overwhelmed by the multitude of possibilities and fears that have built up in our minds. Instead of focusing on one thing at a time and taking small steps, we become paralyzed by all the options and outcomes we have imagined. This often leads to inaction or indecision. It can leave us stuck, waiting for the perfect moment or the perfect answer, even though there's never truly a perfect solution. By the time we do make a decision, it's often after so much thought and worry that we are exhausted, anxious, and unsure. The key to breaking the cycle of overthinking is to become aware of it. The next time you start to spiral into negative thoughts, pause and take a step back. Ask yourself, am I focusing on something real, or am I imagining something that hasn't happened yet? Challenge the thoughts that don't serve you. Instead of imagining all the worst things that could happen, focus on the present moment. The more you practice this, the easier it becomes to catch yourself before you fall into the trap of overthinking. Another crucial step is to limit your mental space. When you start to feel overwhelmed, take a break. Engage in an activity that distracts you and brings you back into the moment, whether that's going for a walk, talking to a friend, or simply breathing deeply for a few minutes. This gives your mind the space it needs to reset. The more you allow yourself to disconnect from overthinking, the better you will become at handling stress and uncertainty. It's important to realize that overthinking rarely leads to answers. Instead, it drains your energy and causes unnecessary stress. When you spend too much time thinking about something, you forget to act. And often, action is the best solution to any problem. You do not need to figure everything out all at once. Sometimes the only thing you need to do is make a decision and move forward with it, trusting that you can handle whatever comes your way. Overthinking may feel like a way of controlling a situation, but in truth, it only tightens its grip on you. It convinces you that by thinking more, you will understand the situation better or avoid mistakes, but that's rarely the case. Instead of thinking endlessly, give yourself the permission to be okay with uncertainty. Not everything has to be figured out right away. Sometimes the only way to find clarity is to stop overthinking and simply take the next step. Overthinking can often lead to the creation of problems that never even existed in the first place. It's like building imaginary mountains where there were none before. The moment we start overthinking, our minds begin to concoct scenarios that are far from the truth, often distorting the situation completely. We imagine the worst possible outcomes, and suddenly, Something that was once small and manageable turns into a big, complex issue. But here's the catch: these problems don't actually exist. They are simply constructs of our overactive minds. For instance, imagine you receive a message from a friend, but they don't reply immediately. Now, instead of assuming they're just busy or distracted, overthinking makes you wonder, did I say something wrong? Are they upset with me? Did I offend them somehow? This train of thought continues to build, and before long, you've convinced yourself that your friend is angry with you, even though there is no real evidence to support this. The problem you're dealing with is no longer about the delayed reply. It's about an imagined conflict that doesn't even exist. This type of thinking often leads us to waste energy and time on concerns that are entirely based on our own assumptions and anxieties. We begin to analyze every little detail, trying to find hidden meanings and signs that support our unfounded fears. In doing so, we overlook the simple reality that most of the time there is no issue at all. The more we dive into overthinking, the more we inflate the problem, and the less likely we are to see the situation for what it truly is. Our minds spin in circles, caught in a web of uncertainties that we've created ourselves. This process of imagining problems that don't exist also makes it difficult for us to solve real problems when they do arise. Instead of focusing on actual issues and dealing with them directly, we spend so much time and energy on things that are not even real. For example, if you're worried about a big project at work, overthinking might make you feel as though the task is insurmountable, even though you have the skills and resources to complete it. The fear of failure, which doesn't have any real basis, becomes so overwhelming that you delay starting the project, believing that it's too difficult or that you won't succeed. This pattern often leads to procrastination. We begin to avoid tasks because we've convinced ourselves that they are far more complicated or stressful than they really are. The longer we avoid these tasks, the more we feed into the imaginary problems we've created. Over time, this only increases our stress and anxiety, as the unaddressed tasks pile up and the imaginary issues grow even larger. But in reality, the problems aren't as big as we've made them out to be. If we were to take action instead of overthinking, we would quickly realize that many of our fears are groundless. Another common result of overthinking is that it causes us to miss opportunities because we're too focused on potential problems. We become so fixated on possible failures or negative outcomes that we fail to see the potential for success. For instance, you might hesitate to pursue a new opportunity, whether it's a new job or a personal goal, simply because you've spent too much time imagining all the things that could go wrong. But in doing so, you close yourself off from the possibility of success, because you've convinced yourself that failure is inevitable. The more you overthink, the more you narrow your focus, and the less likely you are to take the necessary steps forward. Overthinking also robs us of our peace of mind. It creates a constant internal chatter that keeps us up at night and fills our days with anxiety. Instead of living in the present and enjoying what's happening around us, we get lost in our thoughts about what might or might not happen in the future. We become disconnected from the present moment because our minds are consumed with hypothetical situations that may never come to pass. This constant worry affects our mental well-being and our ability to make clear, rational decisions. The truth is, the problems we create in our minds through overthinking are rarely as severe as we imagine them to be. By constantly focusing on the worst-case scenarios, we forget that the majority of situations are manageable and can be dealt with one step at a time. Most of the time, the things we fear never happen, and when they do, we find that we have the strength to handle them. The more we let go of unnecessary worries and focus on what is real, the easier it becomes to navigate life's challenges with clarity and confidence. Instead of allowing our minds to dwell on imaginary problems, we need to learn to recognize when we are overthinking and gently guide ourselves back to the present moment. By focusing on what is happening right now and taking practical steps, we can prevent our minds from spiraling into unnecessary worry. When we stop creating problems that don't exist, we free ourselves from the burden of stress and start living more peacefully. Trust yourself to make decisions even if they are not perfect. One of the most powerful tools we have in life is the ability to trust ourselves. However, many of us find it difficult to make decisions because we fear making mistakes or failing. We get caught up in the idea that every choice we make must be the right one, and this fear of imperfection paralyzes us. But the truth is, perfection is a myth, and waiting for the perfect decision often leads to missed opportunities and wasted time. The key to moving forward in life is not waiting for the perfect choice, but trusting yourself to make the best decision with the information you have, even if it is not flawless. When we trust ourselves, we embrace our ability to handle whatever comes our way. We recognize that we do not need to have all the answers or know every outcome before making a decision. Life is filled with uncertainty, and no amount of planning or overthinking can remove that uncertainty. Instead of worrying about making the perfect choice, we must trust our judgment and our intuition to guide us. Trusting ourselves means knowing that even if a decision does not work out exactly as we hope, we have the resilience and the ability to adapt and learn from the experience. Every decision is an opportunity for growth, even if the outcome is not what we expected. The fear of making mistakes often leads to procrastination. We get stuck in a loop of indecision, constantly analyzing every possible outcome and trying to predict what will happen next. This can prevent us from taking any action at all, and the longer we delay, the harder it becomes to make a choice. The fear of making the wrong decision becomes more overwhelming than the decision itself, but this fear is irrational. In most cases, the consequences of making a mistake are not as catastrophic as we imagine. In fact, making mistakes is often a crucial part of the learning process. The best way to gain confidence in our decision-making ability is to simply make decisions, whether big or small, and learn from them. When you trust yourself, you also stop relying on external validation. We often seek reassurance from others before making decisions, hoping that someone else will tell us what to do or approve of our choices. While it's okay to ask for advice, relying too heavily on others can lead to self-doubt. When we trust ourselves, we recognize that we are the experts of our own lives. We know our values, our strengths, and our desires better than anyone else. No one else can truly understand what is best for us, and seeking constant approval from others only undermines our confidence. By trusting ourselves, we are affirming our autonomy and acknowledging that we are capable of making decisions that align with our goals and aspirations. Another benefit of trusting yourself is that it helps you take ownership of your life. When we make decisions based on trust in our own abilities, we take responsibility for the outcomes, whether they are positive or negative. This sense of ownership empowers us to act with conviction and purpose. It eliminates the constant worry of what others might think and allows us to focus on what truly matters to us. Trusting yourself means standing firm in your choices and not second-guessing them. Even if things don't go as planned, you take responsibility and make adjustments along the way. You recognize that setbacks are part of the process and that every experience contributes to your growth. Trusting yourself also means letting go of the need for perfection. Perfectionism often holds us back because we are too afraid to make mistakes. We put off decisions because we fear that we will not get them right. But the reality is that there is no such thing as a perfect decision. Every choice involves risks and uncertainties, and it's impossible to predict every possible outcome. By accepting that imperfection is a part of life, we give ourselves permission to make decisions without the burden of perfectionism. Instead of focusing on whether the decision is flawless, we focus on whether it feels right in the moment and aligns with our values. When we trust ourselves, we stop waiting for perfection and start embracing progress, knowing that each step we take moves us closer to our goals. One of the most empowering aspects of trusting yourself is that it builds your self-esteem. The more we trust our own judgment, the more confident we become in our abilities. We start to see that we can handle challenges and make decisions that lead us in the right direction. Over time, this trust in ourselves becomes a powerful foundation for all aspects of our lives. We stop questioning our worth and instead recognize our inner strength and capability. By trusting ourselves, we develop a deeper sense of self-respect and self-love. Trusting yourself is about embracing the journey, not obsessing over the destination. It's about knowing that you are capable of making decisions that serve your best interests, even if those decisions are not perfect. Trusting yourself means believing that you have the wisdom and resilience to navigate life's uncertainties. It's about giving yourself permission to make mistakes and learn from them, instead of paralyzing yourself with fear. The more you trust yourself, the more empowered you become to take action and live a life that is true to who you are. Break the cycle by focusing on what you can control. Overthinking often traps us in a loop of uncontrollable thoughts, where we fixate on things that are beyond our reach. We start imagining all sorts of scenarios that might happen, whether they are good or bad, and feel helpless in the face of them. The key to breaking free from this cycle is learning to focus on what we can actually control. In life, there will always be things beyond our influence: what others think of us, the past, the future, and many external factors. However, there are many aspects of life that we can control, and shifting our focus towards these aspects can help us regain clarity and peace of mind. When we overthink, we often waste our energy worrying about things we cannot change. We may fret about how others perceive us, what will happen in the future, or what might go wrong. But no matter how much we worry, these things are not within our control. The future is uncertain, and the actions of others are unpredictable. The more we focus on these external factors, the more powerless we feel. However, by focusing on what we can control, our reactions, our mindset, our actions, we take back our power. We stop feeling like victims of circumstance and start recognizing that we have the ability to shape our experience in meaningful ways. One of the most important things we can control is our mindset. While we cannot control the circumstances around us, we can control how we respond to them. If we focus on staying positive and cultivating an optimistic outlook, we can face challenges with resilience instead of anxiety. By choosing to focus on the present moment and letting go of fears about what might happen in the future, we regain a sense of agency in our lives. It's easy to fall into the trap of imagining all the worst-case scenarios, but doing so only drains our energy and paralyzes us. Instead, we can train ourselves to focus on the things that bring us joy, the small victories, and the opportunities that lie ahead. Another important aspect of what we can control is our actions. While we may not be able to change everything around us, we always have the ability to take action. When we are faced with challenges, overthinking often prevents us from moving forward. We get stuck in the planning phase, analyzing every detail, trying to figure out every possible outcome. But action is the antidote to overthinking. Even if the steps we take are small, they help us break free from the cycle of indecision and doubt. Every action we take, no matter how minor, moves us closer to where we want to be. By focusing on what we can do right now, we stop allowing our thoughts to control us and start creating real change. When we focus on what we can control, we also become more aware of our own strengths and abilities. We stop feeling helpless and start recognizing the power we have within ourselves. The more we take control of our actions and mindset, the more confident we become in our ability to handle whatever comes our way. This confidence not only helps us in our personal growth, but also in our relationships, careers, and other areas of life. By focusing on what we can control, we stop looking for external validation and start trusting ourselves to make the right choices. It's also important to remember that we can control how we take care of ourselves. Often, overthinking leads to neglecting our own well-being. We become so consumed by our thoughts and worries that we forget to care for our physical and mental health. But by focusing on self-care, whether through exercise, meditation, eating well, or simply taking time to relax, we improve our ability to handle stress and uncertainty. When we are healthy and well rested, we are better equipped to make decisions, solve problems, and face challenges without getting overwhelmed. Self-care is one of the most important aspects of controlling our own experience, and it directly impacts our ability to break free from overthinking. By focusing on what we can control, we also create a sense of purpose and direction. Instead of spinning in circles, uncertain of what to do next, we begin to take deliberate steps towards our goals. This gives us a sense of accomplishment and progress, which counters the feelings of helplessness and anxiety that overthinking creates. When we take control of our actions, we feel more empowered and motivated to keep moving forward. We stop wasting energy on things that are beyond our influence and start investing that energy in the areas of life where we can make a difference. In the end, the key to breaking the cycle of overthinking is realizing that our thoughts do not have to control us. By focusing on what we can control, our mindset, our actions, our self-care, we shift our energy away from what we cannot change and take back our power. This simple shift in focus allows us to regain clarity, peace of mind, and a sense of purpose. Instead of feeling trapped by our thoughts, we feel empowered to take action, make decisions, and move forward with confidence. Give yourself permission to make mistakes and learn from them. Many of us have a deep-seated fear of failure, and we often allow this fear to dictate our actions or prevent us from taking risks. We are taught from a young age that mistakes are to be avoided at all costs, that making an error is a sign of weakness or worse, incompetence. This mindset can be paralyzing and stifling. It keeps us from trying new things, stepping outside our comfort zones, and pursuing the very goals and dreams that are most meaningful to us. But the truth is, making mistakes is an essential part of the human experience, and it is through our mistakes that we often learn the most valuable lessons. When we give ourselves permission to make mistakes, we remove the pressure of perfection from our lives. We stop holding ourselves to an impossible standard and start embracing the fact that errors are not the end of the world. In fact, they are often the beginning of something greater. The fear of making mistakes can lead us to avoid taking action altogether. We may procrastinate, second-guess ourselves, or fail to follow through on opportunities because we fear the potential for failure. But when we understand that mistakes are an inevitable part of life, we can approach challenges with a greater sense of freedom and a willingness to take risks. One of the most important aspects of making mistakes is that they are an opportunity for growth. When we make a mistake, it forces us to examine what went wrong, why it happened, and what we can do differently next time. This process of self-reflection allows us to improve and develop. Each mistake carries with it a lesson, a piece of wisdom that we can carry forward in our lives. Without mistakes, there would be no progress. The greatest achievers in history did not get where they are by avoiding failure. They got there by learning from their failures, making adjustments, and continuing to move forward. It is also important to recognize that mistakes do not define us. So often, we let one mistake overshadow everything else. We may dwell on our failures and allow them to shape our sense of self-worth, but mistakes are not a reflection of our abilities or our value as people. They are simply part of the learning process. When we give ourselves permission to make mistakes, we stop identifying with them and instead see them as opportunities to grow. This shift in perspective can be incredibly freeing. We stop fearing failure and instead begin to view it as an integral part of the journey towards success. Moreover, making mistakes helps us build resilience. Every time we fail, we are given the chance to pick ourselves up, learn from the experience, and try again. This process of bouncing back from setbacks is what builds our strength and determination. The more we fail and recover, the more resilient we become. Resilience is a critical quality for success, as it allows us to handle life's challenges with grace and perseverance. It helps us stay focused on our goals even when things don't go as planned. Instead of being discouraged by mistakes, we learn to see them as temporary setbacks that do not define our future. By giving ourselves permission to make mistakes, we also start to let go of the need for constant approval from others. We often worry about what others will think of us if we fail. We fear judgment, criticism, or rejection. But when we embrace the idea that mistakes are a natural part of life, we stop seeking validation from external sources and start trusting ourselves. We realize that we do not need to be perfect to be valuable or worthy of success. Our mistakes do not diminish our worth. In fact, they add depth and character to our journey. In many cases, the fear of making mistakes can be a form of self-sabotage. We are so afraid of failing that we avoid taking any action at all. This often leads to missed opportunities and unfulfilled potential. By giving ourselves permission to make mistakes, we break free from this cycle of inaction. We start taking steps toward our goals, even if those steps are imperfect. The key is to keep moving forward, learning from each experience, and using our mistakes as stepping stones rather than obstacles. It's also crucial to remember that everyone makes mistakes. No one is immune to failure, no matter how successful they appear to be. Everyone, from the most accomplished business leaders to the most celebrated artists, has faced setbacks and challenges. What sets them apart is not their ability to avoid mistakes, but their willingness to learn from them and keep going. By giving ourselves permission to make mistakes, we join the ranks of those who have learned to embrace failure as a necessary part of the path to success. In the end, making mistakes is not something to fear, but something to celebrate. It means we are trying, learning, and growing. We are pushing ourselves out of our comfort zones and striving to be better. So, instead of avoiding mistakes, let's give ourselves the permission to make them, learn from them, and keep moving forward. The more we embrace our mistakes, the more we open ourselves up to new possibilities, greater achievements, and a deeper sense of self-worth. Acknowledge your thoughts, but don't let them control you. This is a crucial mindset shift for anyone struggling with overthinking. We often find ourselves drowning in a sea of thoughts that seem impossible to escape. Every thought feels urgent, every worry feels significant, and every scenario feels like it could potentially define our future. But the key to moving forward lies not in denying these thoughts, but in recognizing them for what they are: just thoughts. They are not the absolute truth, and they certainly do not define us. When we overthink, we give our thoughts more power than they deserve. We begin to believe that every single thought that enters our minds is worth analyzing or acting upon. This is where the problem starts. Not every thought we have needs to be validated, nor does every concern we have need to be addressed. Many of the worries that pop into our minds are fleeting, often irrational, and completely unnecessary. Yet we allow them to consume us, thinking that by continuously pondering over them, we will somehow solve them or find clarity. This is far from the truth. Instead of feeding into the constant flow of thoughts, we must first acknowledge them. The mere act of recognizing that we are having these thoughts is a powerful first step. By acknowledging the thought, we separate ourselves from it. We stop identifying with it and begin to see it as something external. It's like standing outside of a room and watching through the window instead of being trapped inside with it. This perspective shift helps us realize that we don't have to give every thought our attention. Once we acknowledge our thoughts, the next step is to create a gap between ourselves and them. This gap allows us to pause and decide how we want to respond rather than react impulsively. The thoughts that arise in our minds often have little to do with reality, and much more to do with our fears, insecurities, or past experiences. When we react immediately to these thoughts, we only reinforce their power over us. By taking a moment to pause and ask ourselves whether this thought is based on facts or just our imagination, we empower ourselves to choose how to respond. For example, imagine you are about to give a presentation at work, and suddenly your mind starts racing. You begin thinking, what if I forget what to say? What if my boss is disappointed? What if I look foolish? These thoughts might flood your mind all at once. But rather than letting them control you, simply acknowledge them. I am having these thoughts, but they do not define the outcome. By doing this, you create the necessary space to focus on the present moment, where you can instead remind yourself of your preparation, your skills, and your ability to handle the situation. Another way to acknowledge thoughts without letting them control you is by labeling them. If you notice a worry or negative thought, give it a label. You might call it the what if, the worst case scenario, or the fear of judgment. By labeling it, you can begin to see that it's just one thought among many, and it does not deserve to dominate your attention. It becomes easier to distance yourself from it, seeing it for what it is, just a thought that doesn't necessarily reflect reality. Furthermore, it's important to practice mindfulness, which involves observing your thoughts without judgment. When we overthink, we often start attaching labels to our thoughts, such as I'm too anxious or I'm not good enough. These labels can make us feel trapped in a cycle of negative thinking, leading to even more overthinking. Mindfulness, on the other hand, teaches us to observe our thoughts without attaching any judgment to them. Instead of labeling a thought as bad or wrong, we simply notice it and let it pass by. By doing this, we break the cycle of overthinking and stop allowing our thoughts to control us. In acknowledging our thoughts, we also create the opportunity to replace them with more constructive and empowering thoughts. It's important to realize that we are not helpless in the face of our thoughts. While we cannot control every thought that enters our mind, we can control how we respond to them. If a thought arises that is unhelpful or negative, we can consciously choose to replace it with a more positive and supportive thought. For example, if you think, "I'll never succeed," you can acknowledge it and then replace it with, "I have the ability to succeed, and I will keep moving forward." This shift in focus can break the chain of overthinking and put us back in control. Ultimately, the goal is to find a balance. Acknowledge your thoughts, but don't allow them to overwhelm you. Recognize that your thoughts are just thoughts, they are not facts. They are not truths, and they certainly don't have to dictate how you feel or act. By creating space between yourself and your thoughts, you can regain control, focus on the present, and move forward with confidence, free from the grip of overthinking.